What's the most unforgivable thing a friend did that made you ghost them? Story 1. We had been friends for years, like long-term sisterhood kind of thing. I did so much for her over the years and never even batted an eyelash. I asked her to watch my cat while I went on a 10-day vacation, a cat she also loved because it belonged to her family before me. She agreed to watch the cat. I even called her about 4 days into my vacation to ask her again to check on the cat to make sure it had food, water, and a few scritches. When I came home, my cat's water and food bowls were bone dry, and it let out the most tormenting meows I have ever heard. My friend hadn't checked on her even once during the 10 days I was gone. When I confronted her, she played stupid and said, "Oh, I completely forgot. That was the beginning of the end." Edit. As for ghosting her, I had to. After the cat incident, she tried to make me feel guilty for being mad at her for it. I think I even ended up apologizing because she was so beside herself. A few more disagreements accrued after that, and I was always put on a guilt trip. I decided that I didn't need that negativity in my life anymore, and I ghosted her. To this day, she tries to get back to me. Even through mutual friends, she bad-mouths me, then tells them how much she misses me. Chick is whack. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. When I was in college, me and a friend went out drinking with a mutual friend, female. We drank enough that we all decided to crash at my apartment, which was within walking distance of the bar. My female friend passed out on the sofa as soon as we got there. I chatted with my friend for about 10 minutes before he started talking about her, looking at her and saying things like, "I could bang her right now and she said never know." I am ashamed that I didn't kick him out. What I did instead was stay up all night sitting in a chair next to her, just to make sure he didn't do anything. Screw that guy. Needless to say, I ghosted him after that night. Edit. To those saying maybe he was just mouthing off. No, the things he was saying were way over the line and freaked me out. I kept trying to get him to go sleep it off in my bedroom, but he kept saying, "Nah, I will just crash in this chair right next to her." Story 3. She got pregnant by her aunt's husband, effectively ending her relationship with her mother's side of the family. The man, of course, dumped her before the baby was born. Now, less than 2 years later, she's pregnant again, this time by a man who has a history of hearsay, having gotten multiple women pregnant to control and abuse them. He's single because he almost harmed his last girlfriend and has a restraining order against him. He's 35, she's 23. She kept coming to me, complaining that no one supports or understands her. How could her mother ditch her after she slept with her sister's husband? She says it was an accident, that she only did it because she was in the mood and bored. How could her friends not support a relationship with a man who has been charged with attempted murder? She asked if I could watch her child while she traveled out of state to see this man. She's definitely not considering abortion because she wants them to be a family. I couldn't deal with it anymore, so I blocked her. Story 4. She became very strange, very quickly. About 2 months into the friendship, I went on a ride with her to pick someone up. I was a bit buzzed, having had a few drinks with my husband that night. I lost my phone in her car, which was too messy to find it in, and it was dead, so I couldn't call it. She said she would look for it the next day. The next morning, my husband received a text from her saying she had found my phone but had to work and would bring it to me after work. That seemed fine. As the day went on, I grew antsy about getting my phone back and texted her around 9 p.m. to ask if I could just pick it up at her workplace. She insisted she would bring it, saying she had a bad day and wanted to talk anyway, so delivering the phone would give her an excuse to stop by. All right then. I knew she got off work at 10 p.m., yet she didn't show up at my house until 3 a.m. When she walked in, she handed me my phone, which was 50% charged. She has an Android and I have an iPhone. How and why she charged it was unclear. Then she started saying, Your sister called a few times. Oh, and your mom texted you to call her when you can. And your friend Samantha said she had something to tell you, all while smirking. She must have noticed the look on my face because she suddenly admitted she had gone through all my photos, saying there are a few interesting ones, and that she had read my texts. She said it in a tone that suggested she thought this was normal and cute, something friends just do. I realized she left work at 10 p.m., bought a charger that fit my phone, went home and charged it, and then sat there for hours going through every photo on my phone, reading every text message thread and social media message. Only after she had seen everything did she get in the car to bring me my phone. I was furious and felt sickened by that level of privacy invasion and audacity. I spoke to her only once after that and haven't since, and never will again. That sealed the deal for me. I had noticed her before, looking over my shoulder at my texts, grabbing my phone out of my hand, and scrolling when I was only trying to show her one photo. She had always acted weird about my privacy, but this was the last straw. I had never had a friend do something like that before, and I am 30 years old. It was incredibly disturbing. Story 5. I was getting super close to an old friend from college, his new wife, and their kids. We were going out of town for about a week and asked them to dogs it. It turned out to be the worst-case scenario. They neglected my dogs. There were at least 2 days where they didn't get let out or fed, and they left my younger dog in his kennel for nearly 24 hours. When I asked why there was piss and shit in his cage, their response was, "If I had known it was there, I would have cleaned it up." Like, you're missing the point. I am not mad I had to clean it up. I am mad that you neglected my dogs. He never went potty in the house, let alone his kennel. I was livid. And if that wasn't enough, the house was a wreck. They took about $40 out of our change jar. Let her kid lose all the pieces to my vacuum. Let her kid spill a pound container of garlic salt everywhere, swept it under the couch, used up all our tea and coffee, and put a whole pot of macaroni down the garbage disposal, giving us plumbing problems to this day. For months, it was like finding little shitty cherries on top as I discovered yet another thing they had done. Edit. This got a lot more attention than I was expecting. I dropped them immediately, and we never spoke again. They hadn't really shown signs of being awful before this, and they had their own cat that they took very good care of. Story 6. When I came home, the power was off. Apparently, the bill hadn't been paid. We were friends from work. He had split up from his ex, and I needed to be closer to my job. We went 50-50 on a rental, and he has 3 kids from his previous relationship. Being the nerd I am, I agreed to pay the tech bills, internet, phone, cable TV. He agreed to pay the power since he used more electricity when his kids were over for access visits. I came home to a dark house and decided to investigate. Turns out, he hadn't paid the power for ages because his new girlfriend wanted the money. Then I discovered he hadn't been paying the rent either for the same reason. I ended up down $5,000 for power and rent. We were evicted, and I ghosted him. Story 7. This experience is so fresh for this post that I had to share it. My wife and I, along with another couple whom I will refer to as Rick and Beth, were once the very best of friends with another couple whom I will call Lynn and Dave. They're a little younger than the 4 of us. Rick, Beth, my wife and I have all been friends for going on 30 years, and we've known Lynn and Dave for over the last 20. Through early hints, subtle comments and actions by Lynn herself, it didn't take us long to get the impression that she was someone who sought to climb the social ladder. Her ladder climbing soon became a higher priority than her best friends, her own family, and many times even her own children. The extent to which she pursued this, almost at any cost, was mind-blowing. But like many narcissists, she seemed completely oblivious, almost as if she were wearing a neon sign. Dave was nothing like her, a great guy, and all 4 of us loved being around him. His personality made it easier to deal with Lynn's slowly escalating social climbing because he often muffled her fakeness. We'd all make plans for a night out, vacations or helping each other with moves, family matters, or home projects. But Lynn would often drop out or bow out to kiss bottoms or rub elbows with those of higher social status in the community. At first, it was her bosses. She jumped from job to job, latching on to each one, running errands, or helping them in her personal time. Every time a boss slighted her in her mind, reprimanding her for a work issue, showing favoritism to a coworker, not treating her as a favorite, or not inviting her to something they invited others to, she would pout, find another job, and latch on to her new boss. Several times during a planned move, home project, or repair, Lynn would not show up. More often, she would either force Dave to bring their children along or leave the kids at the task location. This meant my wife or child, or Rick's wife or child, had to volunteer to watch them, which frustrated us all. If the task was at Lynn and Dave's, Lynn would leave the children at our house, making the task 2 to 3 times longer. About 10 years ago, Lynn suddenly became religious and joined a church. Dave thought it was a bit odd, but supported her. The rest of us knew exactly why she joined, specifically to climb the social ladder. Once she gained the friendship of parishioners with elite community status, she became even worse. Lynn soon went to work for one of the parishioners' businesses, then left after 2 years when another business-owning parishioner offered her more money. About 7 or 8 years ago, Lynn began policing who could and couldn't share or post on her social media, even among her closest friends. My wife, or Rick's wife, would share or tag her in vacation pictures, cookouts, or other events, and she wouldn't authorize them. But she would allow those she was using to climb socially. She'd comment out of character and became entirely focused on portraying a false image, unlike the person her best friends knew her to be. There were even a few times she invited 1 or 2 of her socially elite couples from church to a cookout or fire with us present. She'd play it off as if she didn't drink at all or drank very little, which was far from the truth. Rick, Beth, my wife, and I would make a point of saying out loud, "You're not drinking, or you must have tied one on last night not to be drinking today." Early on, Dave would even comment the same way. Her reactions ranged from dirty looks to laughing it off, pretending she hadn't been drinking, or simply ignoring it. She'd invite my wife and Beth to functions, get-togethers, or girls' nights and trips, but more often than not, she wouldn't share the final details or would blow them off with an excuse. After just a few of these incidents, my wife and Beth began having issues with Lynn. At first, Dave would confide in Rick and me about how he disagreed with many of Lynn's actions, her social climbing, snobbery, narcissism, ditching Beth and my wife, and ruining plans we had all made. But over the years, Dave slowly bought into Lynn's ladder climbing and fake image portrayal. He was gradually becoming just like her. For years, Dave, Rick, and I, along with some close male friends, golfed together nearly every weekend in the spring, summer, and fall. But that gradually dropped to a few times a year as he began rubbing elbows with Lynn's friends, the community elite, and golfing at the country club. The only time any of us were contacted for golf was if those friends had plans. We still took a couple of annual guy trips to sporting events or fishing, took group photos throughout the trips, and shared them with our families. In the last couple of years, Dave started bowing out of appearing in photos, saying, "I don't want to be in those," and passed around. Throughout fall and winter, he used to come over every other Sunday after church to watch pro football, but that gradually stopped. 2 years ago, it was only once, and last year, it was 0, just Rick and me. The 3 of us, Dave, Rick, and I, never had to ask each other for help in emergencies or home projects. But in the last year, Rick and I both had emergency home repairs or issues. When we texted Dave, he might give a single reply asking for more details, then never respond again. If either of us called, he wouldn't answer. Occasionally, he would text much later, apologizing and claiming he was in his basement or somewhere with bad cell service, which was clearly a lie. Rick and I would text him about all three couples getting together. He'd make excuses, saying they didn't have a sitter, someone wasn't feeling well, or another person wouldn't make it home in time. Yet later, or the next day, a post would appear from one of their newly found social elite friends, sharing or tagging them in photos and thanking them for attending a cookout or party. A few months ago, on the morning of a big family reunion at Lynn and Dave's, before the COVID-19 shutdown, Dave texted Rick and me frantically about a home emergency. Rick was at my house, so we both went over to help but hardly spoke to him. Lynn kept coming downstairs, whispering to Dave as if stressed. When we finished fixing the major plumbing issue, Rick and I were tossing our tools, parts, and even their broken items into Rick's truck so they wouldn't linger during the family reunion. Dave was rushing us to finish quickly. Rick and I looked at each other, thinking, what the heck is the matter with them? Then two vehicles pulled up. Both SUVs started unloading, and they weren't family, they were two social elite friends with their kids. We looked at Lynn and Dave and shook our heads. Rick said, "Family reunion, eh?" And we left. A couple of weeks later, Rick's basement flooded with sewage. He had a bunch of family staying there and needed help immediately. The sewage went down, but the floor needed cleaning and the furniture had to be moved to the dry corner of the basement. He texted Dave and me. I showed up to help. Dave sent one text back with typical questions about details. Rick answered, but Dave never responded. That was the last straw for my wife, me, Rick, and his wife. Last week, while Rick and his wife, my wife, and I were grilling steaks, we all decided to cut ties with Lynn and Dave. Once the COVID-19 health scare passes and things return to normal, we fully expect they'll realize all four of us are done with them. We've all agreed to be cordial but brief if we run into them, and to refrain from texting or calling back should they try to contact us. Story 8. She burned the bridge. For most of the year and a half that she and I started working at the same place, she bullied me, micromanaged me, made me feel left out, and gaslighted me whenever I tried to confront her behavior. It was almost always my fault. Nothing I ever did was right, and she refused to believe that she has control issues or that she was using me as a punching bag. She started doing this thing where she wouldn't text me unless I texted her first, and then get mad if I didn't text her. So once she quit the job, I stopped texting her. I haven't spoken to her at all since August 2019, and I don't regret it. Story 9. He was one of my best friends, and I loved the guy despite his serious flaws, thinking that we all have flaws but that shouldn't blind us to the good in people. Towards the end of our friendship, however, he made a series of very messed up choices and showed no remorse for the damage they caused, and I decided to walk away. For context, we had been over-drinking and struggling with a bad habit. He lived with his grandparents and had never held a job, instead choosing to deal drugs periodically. I am going to outline the series of events that led me to walk away in bullet points from here on out. At 18, he started dating someone younger than him. While not illegal where I live, I still think that was messed up, but I didn't end our friendship. Then he got her pregnant. He wanted her to terminate it, but she refused, and they decided to keep the baby. He refused to get a job and expected his grandparents and her mother to fully support the baby, forcing her to work while pregnant. He refused to even consider getting sober for the baby. When the baby was born, he didn't bother going to the hospital to visit his baby girl or his girlfriend. He ramped up his drug use significantly while playing no part in the child's life, forcing the mother to work 12-hour days to support her child, while he refused to even babysit. 8 months after the baby was born, he got the same girl pregnant again, blamed her for it, and began verbally and mentally abusing her. He still hadn't attempted to get a job. Despite my best efforts to convince him not to, he became addicted. The girl wisely decided to walk away. He then threatened to harm himself if she didn't stay, claiming she was unloyal and ungrateful for what he had done for her. That was the final straw, and I ended our friendship there. He even threatened to harm himself, but I could no longer call him a friend while he was abusing his girlfriend and neglecting his children for the sake of drugs. I stayed in the girlfriend's life and still am to this day, helping out financially when needed, finding housing and babysitting so she could get a break. She eventually got settled, found a good-paying job, and raised the kids into really great little people. She did a fantastic job. We still meet up a couple of times a month to hang out, and the father still hasn't made any attempt to be part of their lives. He remains a heavy drug user. Story 10. My best friend growing up was a kid I lived next door to from the age of 9 until 18. At school, he would pretend not to know me so he could seem cool to the popular kids. He would invite me places and then ditch me. He would break plans just to hang out with his cooler friends. That behavior got real old, real fast. When I was 18, I moved to the other side of town. We were growing apart, but I would still try to hang out with him when I could. One day, he asked me to come over to his house to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater when it first came out. I was so pumped that I walked 3 miles to his house, only to be told that he was going to hang out at another friend's house instead. But could I babysit his brothers and sisters? Needless to say, things weren't the same after that. I stopped answering his calls. He would stop by and I would leave just to avoid him. He would make plans to hang out, and I never bothered going. I just gave up on trying to be friends with that guy. I had tried so hard for almost 10 years to be a good friend to him, and he just pushed me aside. Maybe I am an a-hole for stooping to his level, but I don't care anymore. Story 11. I have a now ex-friend from 5th grade. I am now 65. He had always been a bit of an odd duck. He lived in someone's attic while going through college and partway through his master's before pursuing his PhD. During that time, he bought and moved into a home he still lives in. He was very afraid of women taking him for his money, so he didn't date seriously until his late 30s. He married a woman whose family has indeed treated him as a money source. We mostly lost touch until my eldest started babysitting his kids. He was in his mid-40s when his eldest was born. Then, when his kids went to college, he asked me out to lunch again, which was nice and low-key. But then he'd start telling me I was gaining weight because my portion control wasn't very good and that I should be able to get 3 meals out of this lunch serving. I am fat and getting fatter, and I don't want a food police. Thank you very much. He'd also go on and on about how I had to know he'd been courting me back when we were in our 20s. Yuck, just know. I am not interested physically. He's nice, but boring to me. Last summer, I went to the wedding of my best friend's son. I booked a room at a semi-fancy hotel up at Lake Tahoe, put on makeup, something I do once or twice a year at most, and in a bathroom that wasn't set up for it, but I managed to look decent. I also put on Spanx, which are hard to pull up with bad shoulders. I posted a picture of myself on Facebook with a snarky comment I don't even remember. A friend responded, joking that the standards for being a lady must have changed since he was young. I was furious. I told him he was rude and that I didn't appreciate it, and I didn't talk to him for months. Last week he emailed me, and when I didn't respond, he called my work, and told them he was an old friend of 55 years. Worried because he hadn't heard from me. He claimed he had called and emailed. I was livid, cold mad. That evening, I got home and emailed him back, going chapter and verse on everything I listed above. I chewed him out for calling my work and made it clear I didn't want to talk to him again. He emailed me back, saying he thought of me every day when his daughter turned on her computer. I was dumping it, and he asked for it, so I gave it to him and blah blah blah. I have blocked him everywhere except email. I hope telling him I no longer want to speak to him sticks. Story 12. She was 28, unemployed, and living with her parents, not even trying to get a full-time job. I had to get food for her after 10-hour shifts on my feet because I lived nearby. Constantly, she would make me wait outside for 45 minutes or more, whether I was picking her up or she was picking me up, mostly because she couldn't bother being on time. Whenever we went out to dinner, she would be texting on her phone, barely listening to me or engaging in conversation. The last straw came when she admitted to lying to a guy she was casually seeing, telling him she was on birth control when she wasn't. She said she didn't care if she had a child and seemed to enjoy drama like it was a reality show. I snapped. At that moment, I decided I never wanted to talk to her again. I simply stopped texting or calling her, and she never reached out to ask why. She also stopped communication. It was like we both silently agreed it was over. We had been friends for 12 years. Either way, it was her loss. My life has changed so much since then, and I am genuinely glad she's no longer in it. Story 13. She kept trying to take me to religious events and gatherings, even after I told her that I am not religious, though I respect her beliefs. Once, she tricked me into attending a 2-hour church sermon. Before that, we had hung out and done fun things like watching movies and having lunch, so I chalked it up to a misunderstanding and gave her another chance. But I soon realized that every time we hung out afterward, she would try to suggest events that sounded religious and would purposely be vague about them. I caught on and asked her directly if they were religious. She would say, "Oh, it's not just about religion. You don't have to be Christian to go." I didn't like that she didn't care about making me uncomfortable. Clearly, our friendship alone wasn't enough. She expected me to be Christian too. We had been close in middle school, and I thought it would be nice to reconnect when we were both home after college. Eventually, I ignored her text to hang out. I had already explained that it wasn't for me, and she wasn't being respectful of that. Story 14. I had 2 friends during college, let's call them Karen and Becky. What made me question my friendship with them was their view on money and how 2 different people seemed to merge into one person that everyone started to dislike. Though we were a clique, these 2 hung out 24/7 since they had multiple classes together and lived right next door. Naturally, I felt left out. A week before spring break, I messaged Karen to see if she wanted to grab lunch once I returned from vacation, since it had been a while since I last saw her. I knew she would be home alone on campus, as Becky wouldn't be there. She said yes. Fast forward a week to the day we were supposed to have lunch, she messaged me saying she and Becky had gone shopping and were broke. That same week, I saw on their Snapchat story that they had been together, eating dinner at the restaurant I had planned to go to with Karen, and then went to the movies. I never told Karen how upset I felt, but I gave her a second chance since it was our last semester and I didn't want to cause drama just weeks before graduation. Over the summer, Becky messaged me saying she was coming to the city I live in for a concert. I offered to let her stay at my place, thinking it would be a good chance to catch up without Karen there. That turned out to be my worst idea, as Becky's personality changed when influenced by Karen. She started complaining that my apartment was far from the concert and didn't like that I had to leave her in the city because of work, which required identification to enter the building. She also complained about money, saying she hadn't saved enough for proper meals. I ended up buying her meals and spending over $100 on Uber rides in a week, as she didn't even offer to cover half. It's funny how Karen and Becky complained so much about money, yet they were shopping, eating out every day, going to movies, and visiting a museum every other week. I was baffled when I saw Snapchat stories of them at Disney World. I realized I didn't need this kind of friendship after I noticed they would talk negatively about me because I was financially stable. So, the last time they tried to reach out, I immediately ghosted and blocked them. As far as I know, they are currently jobless, having never worked hard enough to gain experience during college, and they seem to believe college was the peak of their career. This happened last year, and there's more to the story that I would love to tell, but this is the short version. Edit. Forgot to mention, but Karen was also a huge cheapskate. She got mad at me just for asking her to pay for my $4 drink, even though I had helped buy her dinner while her card had a negative $10 balance. Story 15. I made a mom friend, which is incredibly hard to do once you become a mom. Both of us were stay-at-home moms. Our kids and her son were the same ages. Our husbands got along, and she lived very close. I thought I had hit the jackpot. Eventually, though, things got really weird. She cheated on her husband. I told her she had 48 hours to tell him, or I would. Her husband was a friend to both me and my husband. I couldn't leave him in the dark like that. They eventually agreed to have an open marriage. She could sleep with other men, and he would spend time with an exotic dancer. Both of them had serious health problems they refused to address, but complained about constantly. When her husband was near death from a kidney infection, I took shifts with her at the hospital so he wouldn't be alone, while my husband cared for our 3 kids and her son. A few months later, while he was still recovering, she was placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold. She completely fell apart, and her son stayed with me for 6 days. Her husband was still sick and couldn't care for a very active 7-year-old. I worked with her son's school, her husband, and others to help her. She was a hoarder, and I helped clean and scrub her house. When her boyfriend broke up with her, her husband and I consoled her. When she was diagnosed with cervical cancer, they removed it in one procedure, no traditional radiation or chemotherapy, just some pills. I organized my sisters and me to cook meals for them. I even convinced her mom to pay for a cleaning service for 2 months and helped get her son to and from school. After being friends for 2 years, my husband got laid off. We were a mess. We are fine now, but that was a horrible time. He was going stir-crazy being home all day with all the kids. One afternoon, she came to take my son to the park to play with her son. Later, she texted me saying I needed to be careful because my husband was abusing him, that he had shoved him and yelled at him. I didn't respond right away and called my husband instead. It turned out that our slightly clumsy 7-year-old son had tripped on the bathroom threshold, and the door bounced against the wall. That was the shove she claimed to have heard, the same threshold and door our son had been tripping over for months. I love him, but graceful he is not, and she had seen him do this several times herself. The yelling was just my husband telling him to get out of the bathroom because he was using it. After she dropped my son off, I asked him what happened. He told me nearly the same story, then went to pee and tripped on the threshold as he left the bathroom. Yes, we did replace it eventually. I texted her, saying I was upset that she would accuse my husband of that. But more than that, I was upset she didn't know me well enough to think I would ever allow someone to hurt my child. She had trusted me over and over with her son, yet thought I would put my own son in danger. I told her I needed a few days to think. I never spoke to her again. Story 16. When my best friend started dating her now husband, a guy I had known and chatted with through mutual friends, a decent guy overall, she became incredibly toxic. She would constantly put me down for small things I had done in the past, like poor makeup skills, getting too drunk, or people I had dated. Her partner even blamed me for her promiscuity. I knew it wasn't healthy, but he became her fiancé, and with the wedding not too far down the road, I still wanted to be there to support her since we had been friends for so long. First, she scheduled the wedding on our Thanksgiving. I study in America, and she knew this wasn't a school holiday for me, so attending would be difficult. We had even talked about choosing mutually convenient dates, her idea, not mine, so that I could attend everything. Honestly, I also thought this date was a little selfish in general for a wedding, but I wasn't gonna say that because I didn't feel I should have to point it out. I know it sounds selfish, but Thanksgiving is an important holiday for me too. I prefer to spend it following the traditions my spouse and I have started, so even if I hadn't had school, I probably would have chosen to stay in America with him rather than fly home. On top of that, she constantly made comments about my financial situation and my relationship, saying my partner didn't care about my well-being, while hers did, or that he should be paying for me to live and go to school. Absolutely wild things. I just couldn't do it anymore. I realized that seeing her texts pop up gave me the same feeling you might get in an abusive romantic relationship, and I knew I couldn't stay present in the friendship anymore. I didn't technically ghost her. I told her I couldn't commit to the events anymore and that I was sorry. It was all too much to balance with school, but I wished them the best. I explained that I felt we were just growing in different directions. Naturally, she didn't take it well. Who would? We never spoke after that day. I don't know. I thought I was justified, but I still feel guilty most of the time. I did bail on my best friend's wedding, after all. Story 17. This is probably going to get buried, but I need to get it off my chest. Because I wasn't sober during these two separate interactions, I often wonder if I made the right choice in ghosting my friend. But I figured I can't have the same suspicion twice. It might just be a coincidence. So, here it goes. I started having doubts about Eddie's character on New Year's Day of 2020. 3 friends and I decided to get together at a motel to celebrate. The original plan was for all of us to spend the night there so no one had to drive. The host was the friend I had later ghosted, Eddie. I should preface this by saying I was not sober. I was cross-faded on 3 different substances. But believe it or not, it made me hyper-aware of my surroundings. Moving around was difficult, but I knew what was happening. Gina, a girl I had a small crush on, was basically attached to my hip the entire time. Eddie had invited her, and I assumed it was because he wanted to sleep with her. I liked Gina, but not enough to risk my friendship with my brother and Eddie, so I decided not to make a move despite obvious signs that she wanted me to. Gina persisted. It became clear to me that this was starting to bother Eddie. His tone grew more aggressive, and he stepped up his efforts to keep Gina close. He suggested she keep rolling blunts or drinking. It was obvious he was trying to get her wasted. I think the other friend was also involved in trying to train Gina, though his role was much less significant. I began trying to slow Gina down because I didn't want her to end up in a compromising situation with 2 guys much stronger than her. Once Eddie realized I was catching on to his Etta, that is when my suspicions were confirmed and my mind was made up. I couldn't leave without Gina. I wasn't physically able to fight, and I knew I couldn't take on both Eddie and his friend, but if it came down to it, I was going to have to at least try. I messaged Gina on Snapchat, telling her she had to leave immediately and that I would take her home, despite being high, drunk, and tripping. I knew it was irresponsible, but it came down to either letting her be essayed or risking myself, so I took my chance. Despite a very scary car ride, I got Gina home safely. I rested there for a few hours to sober up, then bawled my eyes out the entire way home. A week or 2 later, that night was stuck in my head on repeat. I couldn't decide whether my suspicions had been correct or if it was the drugs playing tricks on me. Eventually, I decided to give Eddie a second chance. I kept my reasons to myself, but I became extremely aware of him from that point on. We started selling herbs together as part of a plan to help kickstart our dreams. I needed to get a PC for designing so I could create an online portfolio for school. Looking back, I am pretty sure his reasons for selling were more stereotypical, sleeping with girls, flexing cash, and funding his rap career. He was actually good at it, and despite hating him now, I can't deny that he might have a future in the game if he gets his head out of his buns. Fast forward to mid-February. I was coming down from a tab in my room, but decided to smoke to get back up there. I hit up Eddie, who was dealing with stuff with his ex-girlfriend. We picked up his friend, the same one from the New Year's Eve motel incident. By this point, I fully trusted both of them again, and chalked that night up to my inability to handle so many substances at once. Once we picked up Eddie's best friend, Jason, we sat in my car outside Jason's house and smoked. That's when things took a turn for the worse. I brought up my suspicions about the New Year's Day incident. Eddie assured me that while he liked Gina, he would never essay a girl. His words were, "I love honeypot, bro. I am not gonna say I don't love honeypot, but I don't love it enough to essay Gina of all people. Jason then started talking about a trip to Georgia they had taken with a girl he had strong feelings for. Apparently, during that trip, Jason had caught this girl giving Eddie a blowy. It was shocking to hear, but I listened, trying to understand both sides. Then Eddie gave his explanation, almost illegibly, saying, "Yeah, bro, we were in the room talking, and then when you opened the door, you bumped her and her mouth was open, and she fell on my you-know." That's when I knew. I started connecting the dots every time I'd questioned Eddie's character. The times he tried to steal from me, left his trash in my room or car, wiped his Cheeto-dusted fingers on my seats, always had money to smoke up girls but never to give me gas money, even though I was his only form of transportation. Eddie had no respect for the people around him, especially not for me. The smoking ended with Jason going back inside, dissatisfied with the vent session, and me sitting with a twist in my stomach as I realized Eddie was a natural-born liar. I couldn't trust a word that had ever come out of his mouth. I was fed up and wanted to go home, so I decided it was time for him to leave. Eddie was wary but agreed. As long as we stopped somewhere so he could get spray, he didn't want to smell like weed when he got home. I stopped at a Giant, but it was closed. I told him I was just going to take him home, since nowhere was open. It was 2 a.m. He insisted we go to an area where we had nearly been busted by a K-9 unit after smoking before. Luckily, the officers were friendly and let us go, but I wasn't willing to risk it again. I told him I was taking him home. He muttered something quiet, but all I caught was "I'ma rob you." I turned off the car and told him to either get out so we could fight or shut up so I could drive him home. He conceded, and we continued to his house. Up the street from his home, in a bad neighborhood, a Sunoco happened to be open. He made a last-ditch effort to get me to stop, and this time I conceded. The moment we stopped, Eddie began stashing random belongings of his in obscure places in my car. Unbeknownst to him, I saw everything and made a mental note. It was suspicious, but not an immediate red flag. I just wanted to go home. We got out of the car and went inside so I could buy spray. Eddie tried to get me to buy him candy and drinks as well, but I refused and got back in the car. While waiting for him to come out, I had an epiphany. Eddie had quick hands. He constantly stole lighters and other small items from convenience stores. I decided I wasn't going to wait around for him to possibly get caught. So I gathered all his belongings, dumped them in the Sunoco parking lot, and went home. I felt guilty for leaving him there for a while. There had been shots fired in my city that night, and I regretted not making sure he got home safely. I didn't like him, but I didn't want him dead either. I found out in early March that he was alive and well when he DM'd me on Instagram to threaten me. Some people never change. Some will try to drag you down while disguising it as help. Keep your heads up, folks, and please stay safe. Story 18. We were friends for 13 years, and I had helped her through a lot of rough spots. She lived with my family for a while, then moved out to attend a trade school. There, she met a guy, they fell in love, and eventually got engaged. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and I said yes. She was a bit of a Britazilla, which is understandable. It's her wedding, but I let it go and did what she asked. I drove 19 hours across 2 states to attend her wedding. When I arrived at the venue, she was throwing a fit because there was no power. She hadn't applied for a permit to use the park. It was mid-January. There was no walkthrough, no rehearsal, not enough food, and no proper place to get ready. The planning was chaotic, and she blamed everyone but herself. The wedding came and went, and afterward I returned to our hotel room with 2 other bridesmaids. I got a text from her. "I don't appreciate you talking shit about me behind my back. We're done here." I was confused because I hadn't said anything. Apparently, one of her other friends was jealous that I was maid of honor and told her I said awful things. I was tired of being taken advantage of and upset that she would throw away a 13-year friendship over hearsay, so I blocked her, and that was that. Story 19. 1. I ghosted my high school crush back in 2011, if this counts. I had a huge crush on her, and while she sometimes seemed interested when talking to me, she also made fun of me behind my back. She was popular and had plenty of guys after her, but I was the one she mocked. Looking back, she did approach me on her own a few times, so there's a good chance she actually liked me. But since I was from the lowest tier crowd in school and she was at the top, she probably felt she had to save face with her friends, many of whom bullied and disliked me. Over the years, I ran into her at random. At first, we ignored each other, but eventually, we crossed paths face to face and finally talked. It was casual, like nothing had ever happened, and honestly, it was pleasant. Later, I moved out of town, so the chances of seeing her again dropped. The last time I did see her was at a local club back home. We noticed each other from afar, but there was no reaction, and I had to leave. Nothing came of it. Last I heard, she had a baby with someone, so she's a mom now. I do wish her the best. 2. A friend I had from high school and later college was very funny and helped me through some tough times with the girl from Case 1. The problem was, she talked way too much and the friendship became one-sided. Everything had to revolve around her and her problems. Whenever I brought up my own issues, they were immediately dismissed and replaced by one of her many dramas. I ghosted her for about 3 months after she told me she had decided to get back with one of her military boyfriends, a guy who clearly only used her for intimacy. This came after repeated patterns of manipulation, gaslighting, cheating, and emotional abuse. She reached out to me later and we talked. I explained how I felt and she promised she would change, but she didn't. When she slipped back into using me as her emotional pillow, I started slow texting until I eventually stopped replying altogether. It took her about a year, along with a few more verbal fights, to finally get the hint. I still have her on social media, and while we rarely interact, she occasionally likes or comments on my memes. Beyond that, there's been no real conversation in years. Story 20. She constantly sought encouragement to improve herself, asking me to push her to take painting classes, work out, and so on, but she never actually followed through. She was oblivious to the pain her selfishness and entitlement caused her family, especially her elderly father, yet she would get very upset over minor inconveniences. She often called for long talks because she was disabled, bored, unmarried, and thrived on drama. I am also disabled, but I was busy helping run our family business, finding adaptations for exercises and artwork, and taking care of my family. To be honest, she had actually been supportive at times and helped with a lot of research when the doctor was discussing the possibility of implanting an anti-pain device or amputating my left leg due to compartment syndrome. Because of that, I felt some obligation to be there for her as well. Over time, I got to the point where I only answered her calls once or twice a month and didn't pay much attention as she rambled. This worked for a while until I realized my very elderly disabled sister was seriously ill and shouldn't be living alone. Since she and my sister were phone buddies, she began calling constantly and trying to advise me on how to handle things. We were in the middle of moving our store to a larger location, planning my daughter's upcoming wedding, and preparing our house for someone with dust and environmental allergies. I moved my sister from California to my home state in less than a week while helping her tie up loose ends, empty her apartment, gather her medical records, and manage her frequent hospital visits due to severe gastric issues. Once she arrived, we had to put her in a hotel for almost a week while we finished prepping the house, scrubbing top to bottom, and clearing out the guest room, bathroom, and a set of kitchen cabinets to make her as comfortable as possible. My sister arrived in early August, and within days, she was back in the hospital. We had hoped her issues were caused by an unknown allergen in her apartment, but that wasn't the case. She was terrified and lonely, having lost her 30-year support system and network of doctors overnight. I called almost every gastroenterologist in town, but the earliest appointment I could get was nearly a month away. Meanwhile, she couldn't keep almost any food or water down. I desperately tried several urgent care facilities, hoping someone could help her, all while trying to avoid my friend's phone calls insisting I needed to work harder to find better doctors. My sister became so dehydrated that the last urgent care couldn't even get a blood draw and left her with terrible bruises trying. She told me she didn't want to go to another urgent care and even asked me to help her end her life, which I refused. I did, however, respect her right to make her own medical decisions and agreed not to take her to any more urgent care centers. My sister was brilliant, capable, and fully aware of her limitations. She had lived in severe pain for over 30 years and was simply done. Meanwhile, my friend went on a screaming rant at both of us. I focused on keeping my sister as comfortable as possible, continued working hard to get her an earlier gastro appointment, and sorted out moving her insurance. Every time I went grocery shopping, I picked up anything I could think of that might stay down. She tried bits of everything, but nothing worked. We even tried CBD, since we had heard it could help with nausea. We went to the only certified dispensary in town and got the CBD oils. My sister tried them twice, but both times she became violently ill, and the second time she even had white foam in her mouth. It was terrifying. A friend suggested we give it another try, and finally, she started moving a bit more. We got her a walker and a wheelchair, and she began taking short laps around the kitchen when my husband wasn't there. She had lived alone for nearly 20 years, and clothing, except for loose underpants, was painful, so she didn't wear much. The family had a small conclave and decided that as long as she was moving around, that was progress, so we went with it. It was quite unnerving for my mother-in-law, though I forgot to mention it to her. One early morning, she came out for a walk and wanted to look at something in the living room. She got her legs, walker, and a chair all tangled together and fell. It was a horrible crash, but she only let out a small squeak. My husband jumped out of bed. She was lying on the floor, tangled in the walker, mostly non-responsive. I quickly covered her and untangled her while he called 911. The EMTs got her conscious, but she went through odd moments where she acted like a very cheerful 4-year-old, then suddenly became sharp as a tack again. She even flirted shamelessly with the EMTs. It was remarkable to watch. She often sang to herself to manage anxiety, so while they were inserting lines, attaching a heart monitor, and taking her vitals, she alternated between flirting, singing, and being 4. They told me she was the most interesting patient they had ever seen. She was known for her eccentric, funny brilliance. At the hospital, they ran a full battery of tests over several days and gave her fluids to stabilize her. It took more than 5 bags of saline to get her back to normal. Almost none of the tests were definitive, and she could hardly keep anything down. The diagnosis, terminal gastritis of unknown cause. She and I had often discussed end-of-life wishes and held each other's durable powers of attorney. We had to sign papers indicating that she wanted to enter home hospice and palliative care. She was violently nauseous, in pain, exhausted, and the doctors had no solutions. They couldn't keep her any longer since nothing more could be done except IV treatment. We brought her home and fed her a bite at a time whenever she felt she could handle it. All she wanted were mangoes, so my daughter and I scoured the town and managed to find 3 or 4 ripe ones. She remained sharp as a tack for a few days until dehydration set back in. A friend called and berated me for not taking her back to the hospital, saying I was ending my sister and that I could be arrested. I tried explaining that it was my sister's choice and that when someone in palliative hospice refuses treatment while lucid, this wasn't really an option. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had. I wanted nothing more than to save her myself. In the end, I had to tell my friend I could not discuss it anymore. I don't know if they ever spoke with my sister about it. We set her up with her own phone so she could say her goodbyes and listen to audiobooks. I spent every spare minute with her and will be forever grateful for the gift of caring for her at home. She lasted less than a week after that. I had to watch that brilliant, vital woman fade away. I didn't sleep at all for the last 3 days, sitting with her and holding the phone so she could hear her children and friends. She went faster than any of us expected. Hospice had anticipated several weeks, but she passed while one daughter was still on the way and the other was making arrangements to come. It was a difficult death. She clenched her teeth every time the nurse or I tried to give her medication to ease pain, nausea, or the congestion from the death rattle. A death rattle usually lasts 10 to 12 hours. Hers lasted 2 days. A friend kept calling afterward to commiserate, but I couldn't. I was still torn up from our earlier conversations and had to take care of the funeral arrangements, return borrowed and donated medical equipment and supplies, care for family who came to mourn, and review her will. She left no estate. Almost everything had been given away when she moved in, but I discovered she had appointed me as executor, which meant dealing with legal matters and unpaid bills. At the same time, I was handling legal matters and logistics for our store move, preparing for my daughter's wedding, which was only a month away and not postponed, and organizing my biggest art show of the year, less than 2 weeks out, which we needed for income. A friend kept calling, wanting to chat, but I simply couldn't. I was on autopilot and could only manage conversations with my kids and my husband. She got miffed, but the drama was too much for me to handle. A few days after my daughter's wedding, I finally had to slow down and process everything. I became so depressed that I could barely function, went to bed, and didn't answer anyone's calls for over a week. A friend started texting me, insisting I needed to pull myself together, then launched into a tirade about how unfair her life was. I cut the conversation short when she said she wanted to send the socks and robes she had bought for my sister so I could wear them. I told her not to send anything, blocked her, muted her, and haven't spoken to her since. Honestly, I don't think she's tried to call. It may have been mutual ghosting. I hope she's okay, but I just couldn't anymore. I have cried while writing most of this. I miss my sister so much. She passed on September 12th. I feel like I should be doing better than I am, but I haven't been able to let go of her last few weeks. Hospice has offered counseling, but I've been sick with one thing or another since November. I was just in the emergency room today with a blood clot not deep, just surface vessels, and inflamed lungs. I assume it's from stress, and I tell myself this, too, shall pass. Story 21. Man, this thread makes me feel like all the people who ghosted me personally weren't worth my time and were the kind of people I shouldn't have tried to please or be friends with. I am not saying anyone here who has ghosted someone else is like that, but the reasons most of you give for ghosting mirror what people who ghost me do. I probably should have ghosted them, but I can't help myself. I just want people in my life, and I am willing to endure a lot of abuse to have that. For what it's worth, I believe in telling people your issues with them and formally saying you're taking a break. Ghosting is really psychologically damaging, and you'd be surprised how many people can actually change if they're made aware of their problems. I genuinely feel like the number of relationships I've had with no closure has scarred me for life, and I will never feel whole. Seriously, tell me you dislike me because of this or that, let me have my 2 cents, and then we can part ways amicably with no unresolved issues, or maybe, just maybe, solve the problem and continue the friendship. There are a couple of girls I dated who told me straight up that they no longer had romantic feelings for me, and I was more than happy to move on. I have so much respect for them for treating me like a person and not ghosting me. We drifted apart over time and didn't maintain a friendship, but that honestly just happens when the main thing you had in common with someone was sleeping together and little else. This is the first time I've even thought of them, whereas everyone who ghosted me is on my mind 24/7. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.